You feel it when you walk down the street and try not to make eye contact with a mentally ill homeless person, or when the anxiety rises up in your chest as you're walking down into the subway. You see it in the empty storefronts, the graffiti, the grime, the migrant influx, the random violence. The city just feels threatening, out of control, and in crisis.
So what did you think of his video and the way that he is sort of situating himself in this race?
Well, I'd be interested to know when the last time was that Governor Cuomo actually walked down the stairs and took the subway, because I can't recall that off the top of my head when it comes to him, given the fact that he hasn't lived in New York City for more than 2 decades. You know, he is trying to portray this as a city in chaos that requires someone like him to deliver a steady hand through that time. And the irony of it all is that he is the chaos. Many of the issues that he has identified are ones that are direct results of policies that he pursued as the governor of the state, whether it was shuttering hospital capacity across the city, whether it was cutting funding for New York City, whether it was stealing money from the MTA. There is so much of what we are living through right now that is a direct result of his time in Albany as a disgraced governor. And I understand why Andrew Cuomo is running away from his record, because if that was my record, I would try to do the same as well.
What do you think will be different for you in this campaign versus other progressives who ran against Eric Adams last time? Because, I mean, I hear this Andrew Cuomo message. It sounds very similar. They're stylistically somewhat different, but very similar to the way Eric Adams positioned himself. I'm going to be tough on crime. The chaos is going to be over. We're going to, deal with this issue of your personal safety, et cetera, and kind of a law and order approach. So he's very much trying to put himself into that lane at this point. And look, last time around, it was successful. So how do you sort of respond to that and reassure people that, you're going to be serious about the issues that they're concerned about that led them to vote for Eric Adams in the first place?
To your point, Andrew Cuomo is running for Eric Adams' second term. It's the same agenda, the same donors, the same chaos, the same corruption. And I think a lot of New Yorkers can see through that. But to your point about 2021, one of the things that I recall is Eric Adams running on a promise to New Yorkers that they need not choose between safety and justice. And I think it's easy for us to characterize him as a candidate then as if he was a full representation of him as a mayor now, when in fact he did run with messages beyond that of the mayor he has become. And that's why so many New Yorkers feel betrayed, is that they did vote for him in the hopes that it was the son of the working class to deliver the outer boroughs into City Hall. And yet he has been a mayor for the millionaires and billionaires of the city and described himself as real estate. And with the campaign we are running is a campaign laser focused on the cost of living crisis. It is a campaign that says, while we must tackle the crisis of corruption in City Hall, that most New Yorkers cannot even afford to worry about that crisis because of the cost of living. Because if they can't afford their rent or their childcare or their groceries or their MetroCard, they can't afford to worry about anything that's happening in local politics. And that also means being serious about safety. And I'm excited that in the next month, we're going to be putting forward a proposal that will be unveiling a new department within city government called the Department of Community Safety that will tackle these issues that Andrew Cuomo is pretending to address and actually deliver substantive solutions. Because ultimately what we're seeing, whether it's from Cuomo or Adams or a whole host of establishment politicians, are the same ideas to the same crisis that has pervaded for years and is only going to deliver us the same results. And what New Yorkers deserve are outcomes. And what we're excited to present is data-driven proposals that are built off of the successes we've seen in cities across the country that New Yorkers finally deserve to call their own.
Zooming out a little bit from your race and relevant to the comments you just made, the knock on people like you and me who have very similar politics is that, it only appeals to this sort of small sliver. Sure, an AOC can win in New York City, but it doesn't have a broader appeal. It's these, affluent, young, mostly white people in Brooklyn that are sympathetic to your style of politics. How do you get beyond that caricature? How do you build a truly working class base, multiracial working class coalition? And what also are the lessons for the broader Democratic Party about how to achieve that as, those constituencies have been fleeing or just staying home or moving over to the right and voting for Republicans?
I think there's often a temptation in the Democratic Party to treat non-white constituencies purely through the prism of race, as opposed to also addressing the immense way in which class shapes every person's life in this country. And what we've found is an incredible amount of success in speaking to Black New Yorkers and brown New Yorkers and every kind of New Yorker with that same focus on an economic agenda. Because when we look at the impacts of this crisis of a cost of living, these impacts are racialized. And what I mean by that is they disproportionately push Black and brown New Yorkers out of New York City. From 2010 to 2019, we lost nearly 20% of the city's population of Black children and teenagers, nearly 20%, because of how expensive the city had become and that their families had to leave. That is something that needs to be tackled head on at the source of it, which is the fact that rent is too expensive, childcare is too expensive, even our Metro cards are becoming too expensive. And I think that the way that we actually build a message that resonates beyond, one strip of the waterfront is by ensuring we're taking this message to all 5 boroughs. And I was very heartened to see in the last fundraising period, we had the most donations from more than 100 different zip codes across New York City, that we raised more money than any other campaign, did so from more New Yorkers than every other campaign combined. And ultimately, an inspiration for this politics is also thinking about Bernie's runs for president, where even when he came to New York City, he managed to win more than 40% of the vote on Staten Island, which is often considered a place where Democrats are that simply in name only, when in fact, Staten Islanders are just like any other borough where people are feeling left behind by the economic policies of this mayor and of this party. And it is an urgent moment for us to respond by putting forward an alternative path that actually speaks directly to working people.
What has your reception been from the sort of mainstream Democratic Party? I've seen some people, Hakeem Jeffries, unwilling to say like, hey, Eric Adams, maybe you should resign. Kirsten Gillibrand being sympathetic to Andrew Cuomo, even though, she was at the forefront of the Me Too movement previously. But what have some of the, what has the overall reception been? Have people from the mainstream Democratic Party reached out to you? Because I think it's undeniable the way you've been communicating, and certainly your grasp of social media and how to make viral content and how to understand the attention economy. Like, these are things that the Democratic Party really should be like trying to learn from. Do you get any sense of that, or are they just, afraid because you represent a different brand of politics that's not going to be beholden to the corporate and the billionaire class?
I think there's definitely a little bit of that fear. I think also there's been quite a bit of surprise. When we launched this campaign, there were many who treated it as an interesting idea at best. And it was discussed as if it was something that would come and go in the span of maybe a few weeks at best, maybe a few months. And now, being the best placed progressive challenger to the failed mayoralty of Eric Adams and the disgraced governor of Andrew Cuomo, that is something that many did not expect. Now, we always believed that there was a pathway for this kind of politics, because ultimately, I think there's been a misreading of our political context in New York City, where people have thought that Trump winning more votes than a Republican nominee for president in many years in this city, a rightward shift across New York State, the most of any state in the country, is all indicative of a shift towards the right wing, when in fact, almost 5 times as many people who voted for Trump over Democrats as they had in 2020 instead stayed home. And what I think that speaks to is the need for a politics that is for something, that is fighting for working people, that requires no translation, that when I say the platform, you know what it means in your life. And that's freezing the rent, making buses fast and free, delivering universal childcare, building 200,000 affordable homes. These are things that people understand because it's the very things that they're missing in their life. And I think that's what's created this pathway for us, and will continue to do so over the next 3.5 months.
Last question for you. What is it going to take to be able to defeat Andrew Cuomo, and how can people support you if they're so inclined?
I would say there's 2 things. The first is money. Andrew Cuomo's allies are already setting up a super PAC with the goal to raise $15 million. We're lucky in New York City that we have a public matching fund system where the city matches a New Yorker's contribution 8-1. We've already raised $4 million. We can raise another $4 million through this program. And so I would ask anyone who's interested in